There are lots of helpful adages about how to manage your money. Pay yourself first, don't spend more than you earn, put away enough for a rainy day. You've heard them all before. But even better, say those in the know, make a personal budget and stick to it. Advisors say, I see heads nodding here already, advisors say it's amazing how many people don't do that. It's not as daunting a task as you may think, and here to help simplify it and maybe even inspire you to take the plunge, we're joined by Kingsley Chack. He is Senior Vice President, Deposits, Savings and Investments at Scotiabank. Stephanie Wolf, Certified Financial Coach and founder of Wolf Collective Wealth. And Shay Myers, Licensed Financial Educator and creator of the online educational platform Finance for the Culture. Great to have you three with us here at the table here. I'm going to start with just some numbers here that I'm sure all of you know, which are somewhat terrifying, but let's do these anyway. Sheldon, you want to bring this graphic up? This is the best and most recent data on the financial habits of Canadians. It comes from 2019, the Financial Capability Survey, which found about half of Canadians have a budget, which of course means half don't. 20% of those who do budget report using a digital tool such as a spreadsheet or an app. And Canadians who do budget are 10 percentage points more likely to make progress on their debt. All right, with that as our foundation for our discussion, who am I going to go to first here? Stephanie, why do so few people budget?
I think a lot of it actually comes down to the emotional framing of thinking about what a budget is. A lot of people think, oh my God, a budget means that I can't spend money. And it's sort of a reduction spend, right? And I want people to reframe that and think about it in a different way. It's a spending plan so that you can get control of your money. So instead of whittling away and thinking about how little do I actually have, flip that on its head and think about it as a spending plan.
Tell us about that 50% that don't budget. Why don't they make out a budget?
I think a lot of people don't know where they actually are. And so, or they're wrapped up in their past horrible spending habits and they don't know how to move forward. I think a lot of people lack guidance as well. And so let's say someone is, for example, in a lot of debt or has horrible spending habits, they don't really know the first step to move forward. And so they just avoid it altogether.
What do you say?
I think it's the intimidation factor. Right?
Intimidation.
Intimidation. People think that I need a big spreadsheet, I need to track everything, it's going to be tough, it's challenging. But you know, there are a lot of tools right now that you do it every day and it's actually simple. I think the first step is having a conversation, starting a budget, and getting started is really the first step.
Tell me more about that conversation, Kingsley, because, okay, you're talking to a client. The client doesn't budget. They don't know how to budget. How do you start that conversation with them to get them on the path?
Yeah, the first step is, what's your goal? What do you try to achieve and what do you want to do? Once that is defined, then really looking at your spending pattern, right? And so nowadays at Scotiabank and a lot of other banks have personal tools in your mobile app that help you to look at your spending. And they automatically categorize it, so you don't need to, every spend, you go to your phone and lock it down. You don't need to do that anymore. Every month and every day, you can look at how much you have spent and making those simple and easy to follow. You know, we talk about only 50% budget. How many people actually stick with the budget and follow through? Probably a much lower amount.
Right. When you're talking finance for the culture and you want to get people on a budget, how do you start?
How do I start? So I get to know them. I get to know what their current spending habits are. And I also, just like you said, goal setting as well. Like, where are you and where do you want to go? So I do something called a financial analysis where I look at their cash flow. So what is coming in on a monthly basis and what is going out? And
those numbers should have some relationship to one another.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if they have disposable income at the end of every month, where is that going or how can we properly allocate that? And then if they don't, like if they're in the red, we need to look at their expenses, right? Like, are you overspending in some area? Or honestly, sometimes the cold, hard truth is that you need to make more money. But the financial analysis is going to reveal all of that.
Gotcha. Stephanie, how does the conversation start with you?
Well, for me, I think it comes back to the relationship. I think money is a very emotional topic, and we were sort of alluding to that just a couple of minutes ago. But I think starting with what's important to them first. I think defining, we talk about the goals, but I think it's understanding what your relationship is with money. And if somebody does have money behaviors that maybe don't sound very healthy.
Like
It's
what?
Maybe overspending, perhaps in areas where they shouldn't be. Identifying those triggers. What is driving the emotional feeling for you to want to overspend in certain
You
areas?
have that conversation.
I do.
So that's very, you're
It's-
more psychologist than banker at that point, aren't you?
Before you even get into the money conversation, I think it's really important to define what your values are and what's important to you before you set those goals, because it becomes too black and white and it can be a little bit difficult to make that emotional change. It's about those tiny habits, right?
Okay, tiny habits. Shay, how do you tell somebody you don't have the income to be spending $8 a day on lattes, so stop it?
So the financial analysis will reveal that. It literally say, based on your income, based on your expenses, this is how much you have at the end of every month, or this is how much you don't have. And I like balance. I want people to enjoy balance. So focus on your financial goals, but also enjoy life. But I made a TikTok about this the other day, honestly, and I said, look, sometimes you have to make a decision. If you can't afford to do both, you have to make a decision of what is a priority. And that's just what it is. I do bring a bit of tough love to, my clients, because I want them to see like a change has to be made. And sometimes the answers are literally, like you just said, black and white. And so if it is a situation where you can't afford to have Starbucks every single week, you probably already know that, but I'm just here to tell you it again and then also provide you with the backup of the numbers that you can't do it. At least not right now.
Well, okay, Kingsley, money is, how do I put this? Money is still, in many respects, one of those taboo subjects in society, right? We're not supposed to ask anybody how much money they make, and we're not supposed to ask people how much they paid for that house or what's your rent, or there's lots of stuff we don't talk about.
Right.
Is that, should we try to do something about that and make money less taboo a topic?
Yeah, I think, as Stephanie said, money is very emotional, right? It's very personal, but at the same time, it's also fact and numbers, right? And I think, starting with a budget, the first step is really be honest to yourself and talk about this. And when you talk to an advisor, those conversations are private and you have your privacy protected. But it could be sometimes uncomfortable, but that's kind of the intimidating factor a little bit in terms of, it's not comfortable, I don't want to talk about it, and taking the first step to reach out to someone and having a conversation, or you even look at your expenses last month and just looking at it and see where you spend. I think those are one of really good first step, and people should feel more comfortable talking about it and talk to your friends about it. I have conversation with my friends and say, hey, how do you save money? What are you seeing? And those discussions.
You ask your friends how much money they make?
Not explicitly, but we do talk about right now. I think a lot of Canadians' mind is inflation, right? Groceries prices are going up, rent is going up, and it's tougher and tougher. We talk about that. We talk about how do you plan to save your money? Where do you invest money? How much of your percent of your income that you're putting on saving? How much you're spending? So in percentage term, you don't need to think about the absolute number. That makes
Right.
the conversation easier.
And people know those numbers? They can talk about those numbers off the top of their head?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Right? And so, I have friends that will know, we make a plan and save 20% of our income, right? And so that was, maybe I need to think about, is it 20%, 25%, what is right for me? And all those are very personal.
Shay, can you actually have that conversation with your friends, as in, how much money do you make? How much are you saving? How much are you spending? Can you ask those questions?
It's tricky.
Long
it's
pause
tricky.
there.
Yes, it's tricky because, it's so interesting. When I got into this field, I knew some of that information already from my friends because we're friends and we talk about that and we have those transparent conversations. But now that I'm an advisor, it's like they don't want to talk about money necessarily. Maybe they feel like I might know more than them or I might judge them, but
That's it,
I
really,
don't-
isn't it? It's
yeah,
judging.
it's the judge, and it's. I always remind people, like, I started off just like you. My spending habits were trash at one point. I had debt, horrible credit score, and I evolved. So everybody can do it as well.
Tell us more. Tell some of the stupid stuff you spent money on.
Oh my goodness, clothes, shoes, outside food. Uber Eats had a hold on me, and. Yeah, I would spend probably 90% of my paycheck on, I would spend 90% of my paycheck the day I got my paycheck. So it was bad.
Okay, you not only broke the habit, but you're now in a position to advise others on how to do it.
Yes.
So how did you do it?
I got an advisor. So I, met someone who was educating people on how money worked, and I listened and I applied it, and I was able to achieve a lot in a very short period of time. And it was a mindset switch, though. So not only did I learn actually how money worked, but I had someone who actually cared about me and cared about my dreams and my goals outside of the financial spectrum, and who also made it relatable. So that's now what I focus on. I focus on helping people build a foundation, but talking about money fun and relatable. I use analogies. I make comparisons to celebrity, things that are going on in the celebrity world.
Go ahead, hit me with one.
And okay, well, are we ready to talk about life insurance? Because that's something that people don't want to talk about. But we're seeing that certain celebrities are passing away with nothing, no life insurance, no wills, and their families are essentially left with financial burden. And so bringing those topics to everyday people, and helping them understand those things. And also just like, I use humor to talk about money because I like to laugh, and I also retain more information when I'm enjoying myself. So that's how I make talking about money fun.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Can you have these kinds of conversations with your friends, as in how much do you make, how much are you saving, et cetera?
With my friends, some. It depends on the relationship, I would say. Some of them I can, some of them I can't. And it's something that I wish wasn't as taboo. And that's something that, personally as a financial counselor, that's something I'd love to break. But I think that's, things that Shay has touched on. That's why people do work with a wealth coach or a wealth advisor, is because they want to be able to have somebody help guide them. And I wish that more people would do it, because sometimes you just need that accountability and that support outside that will help you move the needle just a little bit, get you on the right track.
There's an expression you just used, wealth coach. Is that
Wealth
what you
coach,
call what you do?
Yes.
You're more a coach than an advisor.
I am more, yes, I am an accredited financial counselor, but a wealth coach, because my goal is to actually help people who have high income but low net worth achieve that high net worth as well. So really working, especially with women who are high earners and looking to get to that next level, but they're not really sure how to actually get started. So helping them establish that base, that foundation, identifying their goals, and how to start investing so that they can reach those goals.
Have the conversation. Let's have it right now. She's a high net worth person, but she's not sure what to do.
All right.
What do you tell her to do?
So, well, the first thing I would do is ask Shay, what does she want to do? Short, medium, and long-term goals. So I would say, let's just pick a medium-term goal. Is there something that you're working towards on a medium-term goal? And I don't know if she's going to answer it for me right now.
But is the idea, I want to be making X number of dollars by the time I'm X number of years old? Is that what you mean?
It's typically finding out the way that they're spending their cash flow, right? Cash flow in, cash flow out. I like to work off the 50-30-20 rule.
What does that refer to?
Which is 50% of their income should be going towards fixed expenses. 20% should be going towards their fixed savings and investment goals, and then 30% towards their discretionary income. So I actually have something called an anti-budget calculator, because I think that 30% can sit off to the side, and as long as you've got that allocated, it's not necessary to have to check every single time that you're spending. Coming back to that mindset I was talking about at the beginning, it's about a spending plan. So if you've got that 50% locked in with your fixed expenses and your 20% with your future self, go and have fun. Go do whatever you want with that 30%. Yes, that's for living life, and that's how you can manage it.
What do you do, Kingsley, obviously there are going to be some people watching this or listening to this who are saying, that 50% of fixed costs for me is not really 50, it's more like 99.
Yeah.
And I have nothing left at the end. I can't save, I don't have discretionary income to have fun with. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's honestly reviewing all the expenses that you have and really understanding whether that 90% is all fixed, right? I would argue that you probably, when you take a good look, not all 90% is a fixed income. So one is looking at it and see how much you can cut off. The other one is, what are other ways to save, right? Is there things that you can do that actually get your dollar to go further every time, right? Like there's, if you are on top of your finances, you not racking up credit card, you're paying off your credit card every month. Using a credit card can get you a lot of loyalty points, and that helps you and earn a few bucks here and there as you're spending to make your money go further, right? So some of those will be helpful, and how do we get those? But those are marginal gains. The most important part is looking at what you can cut, and it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but a needed conversation to get a hold of your finances.
But I'm gathering, Shay, that you're not necessarily dealing with you're dealing with people with money, right? You're not dealing with people who are in a difficult spot and really don't have any savings at the end of the month. Is that fair to say? Both.
I do deal with a lot of people who, they are broke, for lack of better terms, and broke but have room to improve. So it could be mismanaging their money. But I do have situations where some people are just not making enough income. And that could be whether they are just comfortable in their job or they don't know how to take the next step, or maybe they're considering starting a business and they just haven't taken that step yet. But yeah, I definitely deal with people who have a lot of debt, who aren't making enough to deal with those debts. And now it's a situation of, okay, you either need to make more income, or if you can't cut expenses, how do we deal with this debt? You know, whether that's consolidation, consumer proposal, and there is a lot of pushback on those things because there's an impact on your credit. And I always tell people, look, like, doing this is going to allow you to pay off the debt faster. And honestly, improving your credit is not that hard. Like, sometimes you have to make a sacrifice, and I personally would make the sacrifice of a good credit score to get rid of debt faster. So.
I want to know, Stephanie, how you have that conversation with somebody that goes like this. Given how much you're spending, and given what's in your 30%, you really like to go out and have a good time from time to time. You need to get a better job. You need to go out and make more money. How do you tell people that?
Usually we start with having the conversation about where they're at in their career and what their future goals are for their career. Sometimes it does come down to negotiating a higher income, finding a new job, because it is a honest conversation that does come up, which is you might have to be earning more, or you might have to go back to school. There's going to be other factors if you're going to invest in yourself first before you start to invest in other areas of your life. Usually investing in yourself to gain that higher income is sometimes a solution as well.
I presume you give different advice to somebody who's 27 as opposed to somebody who's 58. How does the advice differ?
Usually somebody who's in the later years of their life, they're looking already at decumulation. How are they going to start drawing on their savings and investments to supplement their retirement? And those who are in their early 20s or mid 20s have the entire years ahead of them to start building that wealth. So they're in a very good situation. I always say, it's just start today. Just start today, no matter what, because time is on your side when it comes to investing.
That's what I want to know. How do you convince a 27-year-old that someday, 50 years from now, you're going to want to retire, maybe 40, you're going to want to retire?
Show them the numbers.
You're going to want to retire.
You just show them the numbers. Show them the numbers and how much compound interest can really make a
beautiful
difference.
thing, isn't it?
I love it. I love it.
And you really can convince a 27-year-old to put a little bit aside and save every month?
Usually the woman that I'm working with, yes, they see the potential in the future, and they're typically high achievers, and they're looking for that next level. Yeah.
Kingsley, inflation, thankfully, is starting to get down a little bit, but it's certainly the highest it's been in 40 years. How do you advise people to navigate around the inflationary times in which we live?
Yeah, it's a challenging environment. We're seeing headline news on groceries, rents all going up. I think in a high interest rate environment, the number one thing is reduce your debt, right? Because you're being charged interest on those debts, so every dollar go into reducing that debt is important. I think second of all is investing in your future, like Stephanie said, right? Like if you are with a employer and they do co-investing in terms of a dollar that you put in, they put in another dollar to invest in your future, maximize that, and that's going to help you to build the fund in later in life. And lastly is also how do you set up a rainy day fund, right? On average, 3 to 6 months of your income, and set it aside in case something happened. You have some financial buffer to help you to get through that, right? Like, so those are the three things.
Okay, I saw some numbers not too long ago that said something like 80% of Canadians don't have a rainy day fund. That if they get hit with a disaster, 80% of people don't have 3 to 6 months income sitting in a bank account ready to help out. How do they start?
Yeah, taking the small step to start looking at your plan and start putting savings in there. It could be a bank the rest product. For example, you spend $5.25. The remaining 75 cents will go into your saving accounts, right? So every little one counts. It's about habit and behaviors. How do you automate that and start going by little? It might seem a big challenge to get to 1 month buffer. You need to start somewhere. It may take you a couple months to get to 1 month and slowly build that up. It's about taking the first step to start.
Stephanie, we're in our last minute here. Can people really save during these kinds of inflationary times?
I think so. Absolutely. It comes down to establishing those healthy financial habits, understanding your relationship with money, and making the conscious choice to do better. So, absolutely.
Do you have to kind of, what's the age at which people should start to have some kind of understanding that being smart financially is a thing worth doing?
I think starting with your kids, to be honest. As soon as they're able to open up a bank account or do anything, talk to them, have the money conversations, help them understand the value of a dollar and what that really means to them, because it will help them establish and learn from your healthy money habits too, help them establish a healthy financial future as well.
And a good bank account should be opened at what age?
Oh gosh, I started really young with my children. I started when they were 5. They
No
had their own
kidding.
bank account, yes.
And they got it?
Yeah, well, I'm the co-signer.
Oh, and the coach, too. We shouldn't
Yeah,
forget
yeah.
that. Okay, great. That's Stephanie Wolf. She is with Wolf Collective Wealth. She's a certified financial coach. We thank her for being here today, along with Kingsley Chack, Senior VP, Deposit Savings and Investments at Scotiabank, and Shay Myers. Finance for the culture is what she's all about. My thanks to you three for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.